Just a few minutes ago, right before we walked up here, I posted on X that we can now announce that the SEC is no longer pursuing their appeal in the Ripple case. We're obviously, thank you. That's working against the industry. Posting you're a shit and you're a shit coin or whatever, it's just like, okay. It doesn't even bother me at this point. How do we get to 30 trillion?
It's no longer news. The SEC has officially dropped its appeal against Ripple, and this victory isn't just a win for Ripple. It's a seismic shift that's about to send XRP and the entire crypto market into an unstoppable bullish frenzy. Get ready, because what's coming next will blow your mind. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse is now dropping huge predictions. XRP could soon be part of the White House's digital asset stockpile. That's right, the same XRP that was under legal siege could be embraced by the US government as part of its future financial infrastructure. But that's not all. Garlinghouse is expecting the launch of an XRP exchange-traded fund, ETF, before the end of 2025. And trust me, this isn't just a pipe dream. This is happening, and it's about to shake up Wall Street like never before. And here's where it gets really crazy. As of Thursday, XRP has already shot up 11% in just 24 hours, smashing through the $2.51 mark and flipping USDT to become the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap, only behind Bitcoin and Ether. The momentum is building, and Garlinghouse believes there's a wave of XRP ETF approvals coming in 2025. Companies like Bitwise and Franklin Templeton are already lining up to get in on the action. By mid-2025, we could see a flood of XRP-backed financial products, and that's when things get absolutely insane. Ripple is positioning itself for a new era of growth, with XRP ready to break out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Get ready, because Ripple's victory is just the beginning of a crypto revolution that's going to redefine everything you thought you knew about digital assets. Let's watch clips from Brad Garlinghouse's explosive interview to gain more insight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the video.
This has been a long battle. How much certainty does this provide? Is the entire case over?
So this provides a lot of certainty for Ripple, for frankly me personally, because the SEC had sued me. The SEC has abandoned their appeal. And so they filed suit in December of 2020. We won on the key parts of the case in the summer of 23. Judge Torres made a ruling that XRP in and of itself was not a security. That's almost a verbatim quote. The SEC filed an appeal about 8 months ago. And what they've now agreed is that they're going to drop that appeal. We still have a cross appeal pending. And so we go from being defendant really to plaintiff. So we now are in the driver's seat to determine how we want to proceed.
Are you dropping it?
We're going to see. It feels a lot better to be on the offense than the defense. You know, 4 years, we spent over $150 million defending that case. Not just for Ripple, but for the whole industry. I think it was really important that this SEC, the Gensler SEC, was really trying to bully and continue lawfare, filing lawsuits and lawsuits and lawsuits against crypto companies. That's over now, and I think that's great for the U.S. crypto industry and, frankly, great for crypto at large. It's clear the SEC has said, you know, I think in retrospect, never would have brought this case. The judge did rule in certain instances back in 2015 and 2016, some XRP sales that we sold to accredited investors, to institutions, that those had constituted a security. And so there was a $125 million fine that's sitting in escrow. We wouldn't mind having that back. That's on the table. And I think there's some nuances to how this will play out. But it was important for us, for really the whole XRP community, for them to know that the case is over. For all intents and purposes, the case is over. The SEC is no longer pursuing it.
Court decision had ordered you to pay a $125 million civil penalty for exactly what you're talking about. Is that $125 million paid? Is what you're saying that's still up for dispute?
Yeah. Well, it's not in dispute. I mean, that's sitting in an escrow, and depending upon whether or not we decide to continue with our appeal, we could walk away and the whole thing would be done. On the other hand, when you have a case where there were no investor harm, no investors lost any money, you're kind of like, wait, why are we here? And it really goes back to Gary Gensler fighting a fight that was about power grab, that was about overreach of the bureaucracy to try to take a new industry. that what we're seeing now happen in Washington is smart legislation will come forward. You're seeing that happen with stable coins in real time. And I think you'll have a market structure bill, is what it's described as, to provide clarity and rules for the SEC and CFTC. Well, I mean, at this point, all we're fighting for is, do we want to fight to get the $125 million back? Look, I'll be honest, would I have walked away from that before they appealed, before President Trump put Paul Atkins and Scott Bessent and David Sachs as critical, key, very smart leaders in this industry to bring this industry back on shore? I would have walked away. Now you look at that and you're like, this case in this SEC never would have been brought. And so where we find ourselves is, great, there's a clear legal victory to say XRP is not a security. That was good for the industry. But there's pieces of it that we think could be kind of cleaned up. And the question is, do we want to fight that fight, or can we come to an agreement with the SEC to drop everything?
The whole idea that this wouldn't have been brought under this SEC, have you had that specific discussion with Paul Atkins and with David Sachs?
Well, Paul Atkins hasn't yet been confirmed. He's a very knowledgeable guy about this industry and has been for a long time. But I've had conversations, I won't comment on specifics, with certainly, I think David Sachs would agree that this is a case that didn't make a lot of sense in the beginning. Again, there was no investor harm. This was about Gary Gensler waging a war against this industry. Well, so XRP was named by the president on Truth Social. He posted something saying that there should be other tokens, that there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve and then a crypto stockpile that would include things like XRP.
But days later, the executive order didn't include it. Why was that?
I don't know what specifically was in the executive order. My understanding is there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There'll be a crypto stockpile representing other cryptos. And I would expect that will include XRP. Look, at the end of the day, I think the stark contrast is, in the Biden administration, we couldn't get a meeting with people at the White House. Now we're welcomed into the White House. And that's just a massive change. I think we want this industry to thrive in the United States. We don't want to push it offshore where you have fewer regulation. So I have immense confidence on the ETF. I think there's 11 different filings pending with the SEC to launch ETFs, from everybody from Bitwise to Franklin Templeton and a whole bunch of people in between. I think those will be live in the second half of this year. We have seen, even outside the United States, you have live ETPs. And at a time when a lot of outflows are exiting some of the crypto ETFs, you're seeing inflows into XRP. And I think that's because you had this false negative pressure from the SEC, this kind of, an exogenous hand holding things down that's now being released. And that's great for the market. That's great for builders within the XRP ecosystem globally. But my understanding is that the stockpile will be represented by seized other cryptos other than Bitcoin that then will be in that stockpile. So to the extent that various law enforcement agencies have seized cryptos, which would include XRP, that those would go into the stockpile in addition to the Bitcoin strategic reserve. That's my understanding.
After years of legal battles, Ripple's victory against the SEC marks a turning point for the crypto industry. With the SEC dropping its appeal, Ripple's CEO Brad Garlinghouse is optimistic about the future, stating, "It's a win for the entire U.S. crypto industry." The case, costing over $150 million, is now behind them, and Garlinghouse is confident the crypto space will thrive. With potential crypto ETFs and clearer regulations ahead, Ripple is ready to take charge of a new era of digital assets. Brad Garlinghouse sees a future of growth as the SEC drops its hostile stance toward crypto. While an IPO isn't the top priority, Ripple focuses on acquisitions to strengthen its blockchain infrastructure. Banks are warming up to crypto, especially stablecoins, and Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin is gaining momentum. Ripple remains committed to transparency with XRP's supply as regulatory clarity increases, ensuring stability. With this shift, Ripple is positioned for success in the evolving crypto landscape. Let's watch more clips from the interview.
So is listing possible now for you for Ripple?
Well, it's certainly something that is possible. The United States SEC under Gensler was so hostile to this industry. I mean, ironically, they approved the S1 from Coinbase and then sued them for doing the things they said they were doing. So this SEC, fortunately, is going to be, I think, very constructive and positive for this industry. So I think that's available, and I think the company's at a stage where we could consider that. That being said, it isn't a huge priority. I think most companies are going public. Raising capital is something that is high on their radar. We have been in a very fortunate position to be able to grow the business organically. We're also, frankly, more proactive in looking at acquisitions. This is an industry that finally is going to be able to thrive in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And I think the industry is still underestimating the shift from the headwinds to the tailwinds. That's going to make a bigger difference than people think. And finally, the U.S. market is really unlocked.
What are you actually seeing happen? Are banks really warming up in a way that's significant right now?
I think unequivocally, yes. Just in the last few weeks, I have seen U.S. financial institutions go from being like, look, we're just not going to touch it because we don't want the extra scrutiny of the regulators, which again, may or may not have even been legal, given these are legal businesses. But you have large banks who used to say negative things, now saying positive things. I think the two areas you'll see the most activity in the short term, one is around custody. These are banks that want to be able to custody, particularly when you see real world assets being tokenized. You need to be able to safely manage and custody that for customers and potentially for the bank. And the second is around payments. The global payments infrastructure still remains very dated. Wires are slow. I just had a wire that was sending over euros disappear for 5 days. That's surprising in a world of the internet.
What's next? If you think about the next forefront of stablecoins now that the U.S. is getting toward clarity, what's possible?
Well, I think we're underestimating how big that might get. Today that market's about $230 billion. So I think some smart people think that may go up 10x in the next 5 years. I think that's probably right. The two leading players in Tether as well as USDC are both, I think, poised to do well in that market. Ripple launched our own stablecoin at the end of last year. That's already ahead of our own internal forecasts in terms of where we are at this point in the year. Still, we're small, but the goal is by the end of the year for RLUSD, Ripple stablecoin, to be one of the top 5 in the market by the end of the year. And I think the whole market's going to grow dramatically over this year. I think tokenizing, like what Cathie Wood's talking about, democratizing access to different investment vehicles and different investment types is very compelling. Even, imagine Shark Tank enabling the participation by different sharks. There's some really interesting stuff you could do. Right now, Congress, it seems, is more focused on getting stablecoin legislation passed. That went for markup last week, and I think you'll see that potentially in front of the president in weeks. The other piece of legislation I think will move quickly after that is kind of the market structure bill. Last summer, something called FIT 21 passed the House, did not get through the Senate. I think that a market structure bill like FIT 21 will come before Congress. Hopefully before the summer recess, we'll see that pass also.
Do you think that people are getting a little ahead of themselves and listing things that shouldn't be listed?
Well, look, I don't think about it as lighter regulation because, frankly, I think the industry wants to be regulated. And what we've been saying for years as an industry is we just want clear regulation. We don't want lawsuits just claiming one thing and the next week contradicting themselves, which is exactly what Gensler's SEC was doing. So I think just the fact that we have an SEC who's trying to work constructively, instead of trying to sue more companies, let's actually work and let's codify and get legislation to provide that clarity.
But again, if you don't have that clarity, what you saw years ago was an ICO boom where tons of things that were raising money never worked out for the people that were buying the tokens or the coins.
Look, I agree, and I said then that I think of some of these ICOs were a lot more like IPOs. They were securities. The problem is the SEC then kind of used that to just blanket and say, Gensler said before he was SEC chair, he didn't think they were securities. And then after he became SEC chair, is kind of his power grab. Gensler wanted everything under his jurisdiction. So I think obviously that ICO boom went away, and there's lots of ways this government can regulate and manage fraud and manage criminal activity. And that did happen. People did go to jail. The amount of XRP that was created in 2012 when it was first started, when that blockchain was first started, was 100 billion units. That can't be increased. It's slightly deflationary, and now there's about 99.9 billion units. Ripple owns about 42% of that supply. We have had, and for, 8 years, we published something called the XRP Markets Report, where we share how much we are introducing into the market, because we want that to be predictable, And that has been the case for many years now. And so we will continue to make sure that's very predictable. At some point, maybe we won't be selling as much. We'll see how that plays out in the future. But right now, frankly, we get criticized for owning too much, and then we're criticized for selling some. But we want to do that in a constructive way, which is what we've done for years.
Meanwhile, Bitcoin has surged past $85,000 after the Federal Reserve's recent shift in monetary policy sparked optimism across the crypto markets. The Fed's decision to slow down quantitative tightening and hint at potential rate cuts as early as June fueled renewed bullish sentiment, sending Bitcoin into a sharp rally. This move was interpreted by traders as a stealth rate cut, setting the stage for more formal rate reductions in the coming months. Market expectations forecast 3 rate cuts in 2025, with 1 in each of the second, third, and fourth quarters. Despite the rally, caution remains. The Fed's updated economic outlook raised concerns about stagflation, downgrading U.S. GDP growth projections to 1.7% and increasing its inflation forecast to 2.8%. These adjustments reflect the ongoing macroeconomic challenges that could still weigh heavily on markets. This cautious outlook has entered the crypto options market, where sentiment has shifted. Demand has moved from put options to calls, suggesting that traders are becoming more bullish. But the true test of Bitcoin's breakout will depend on how U.S. markets react in the long run. As we wrap up, how do you think Ripple will navigate the evolving regulatory environment to continue its growth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.